So I get a random text from you, Echo Charles. Get a random text from Echo. And it says, the whole world thinks you're on steroids. Which there's no context around it. And I wrote back, why is that? Or something along those lines. And then you sent me the link to this YouTube video of More Plates, More Dates, which is the YouTube channel. Mm-hmm. And it's this video. And they're trying to decipher whether I'm on steroids or on TRT.
What's up, guys? Derek, moreplacemordates.com. Today we are going to be addressing Jocko's reaction on his Natty or Not. This was brought up in the subreddit, as well as obviously I got literally tagged in it. And the video is blowing up right now. It's at 155,000 views. And when we get into it, we see the length is an hour and 20 minutes almost. So this is the first time I've ever seen a Natty or Not response that was so elaborate that it's like double the length of mine. Like, I'm fucking long-winded as is, and this is like next level dissection, bro. So he goes point for point and basically refutes every single thing I've said or provides clarification on it. So you go, this is the title of the video. Jocko responds, rumors of being on steroids, TRT, response to More Plates, More Dates, DMZ001. So notably, this episode is in color, whereas usually his episodes are indeed in black and white. See the More Plates, More Dates vid. I appreciate the tag, and this is the underground premium content, bro. So, top comments. Jocko is friends that smoke weed all day, eat shrooms, drink, smoke cigars, and are on TRTs. Definitely friends with Joe Rogan. Crying, laughing FaceTime too. I'd love to see a collab with MPMD. Derek's entire video is Jocko on steroids. Echo, am I a joke? Am I a joke to you? Let's see. Fucking my Mexican alter ego. Jocko, I drank when I was in the military. I drank a lot, probably too much. Echo, hell yeah. Jocko reading Derek's quotes is hilarious. So, you know, some of these, the main ones that you would expect to rank at the top are up there. Jocko doesn't take steroids. Steroids take Jocko. Super physiological doses of protection of youth from the deleterious outcomes of hormone exposure, extreme ownership of brand image. I'd love a Jocko MPMD crossover. So some of it is, people are getting further and further into the weeds of the debate, deeper into the comment section you go, as well as on my page. Obviously, there is, a lot of, Jocko, watchers that are, jumping into the fucking comment section now too after this video comes out. And there's, more elaborate kind of insight given now that he has specifically addressed it. Because again, if you recall in the first video, he has basically gone his entire podcasting history mentioning it like in passing, like one fucking time at max. And he mentioned even in here that the tweet, he doesn't even remember that tweet where he was responding to somebody asking if he's on hormones. And he doesn't talk about it because he does not use it. So why would he bring it up? And, reasonable response, obviously. Some of the points he goes through here are basically touching on the, the low sleep claims, the 5 hours sleep a day, because this is, the title of the video. He trains 3 times a day, sleeps 5 hours, and is fucking huge. So that was the title of the subreddit thread, basically. And he basically clarifies, indeed, he does sleep 5 to 6 hours a night, and that's all he needs. There are some individuals with genetic predispositions that can get away with that, and it's rare, but those individuals do in fact exist. Working out 3 times a day. Those workouts are not super intensive. As he mentions, they are not, weight training 3 times a day.
I work out, I lift, I run or surf, and I do jujitsu. And I do that every day. That's an accurate thing. Mm-hmm. This isn't like, hey, I'm blasting legs and squats in the morning, right, and then I'm doing freaking deadlifts at noon, and then I'm doing power cleans in the evening, and I'm doing all those for max reps or psycho metcons. Right. I'm not doing that. Yeah. So that's misleading. And if that's somebody that took me saying, hey, I guess it's wrong for me to say I work out 3 times a day. What would be good is like, I exercise 3 times a day. Right. Or something like that.
But, the clarification on that, frankly, even if you're on fucking tons of gear, you still couldn't train hard 3 times a day. So it's not like to be honest, I don't really take that as a, if I was on gear, I'd be able to hit the weights hard like multiple times a day. Like this was ultimately a bit of a lack of clarification on both of our parts, because it's not like this was elucidated clearly. You know, to be honest, like some of the points still like are reasonable to stand at 50 years old, hitting the weights hard once a day, going fucking surfing once a day, going to do BJJ once a day, all in the span of 24 hours whilst doing a fucking podcast, whilst having a high quality, you know, entrepreneurial, you know, endeavors. Like all these things are pretty goddamn hard to adhere to at a high level and still get your 4 to 5 out or your 5 to 6 hours in where you're still recovering. You know, like it's reasonable to assume with that much shit going on at 50, like you might benefit from, you know, exogenous hormones at, you know, like to be honest, I think that's still a reasonable assumption. All but, you know, him clarifying it, and like definitely kudos to him for being super cool about it. You know, like he, despite totally, you know, elaborating on every point and, you know, completely trying to dismantle each one, he did it in a way that was very, very respectful of, you know, my content and whatnot. And he, you know, spoke highly of it, and it was great to see he didn't, you know, take it poorly or anything. He found it mildly entertaining, with some of the fucking slang and lingo in there and some of my points that may have, you know, been different had he, you know, clarified in certain things. Like for example, the point about him lifting, you know, 405 for 10, the whole, you know, it would hurt me. I could almost do it for that. You know, I could perhaps do, you know, a little bit less than that.
If you can get 405 for 10, that's like good, I think.
Yeah. I'd say I'm, if not there, a little below there.
Yeah, that's good. That's a good squat.
And apparently it's coming from a scene of their, you know, channel that otherwise is not part of the podcast.
The whole way that thing started was me talking about squatting.
Yes.
The reason I came into work talking about squatting because I was on the squat train.
Here's before even that, this is important to know because Derek gets this wrong in the video. He refers to it as the podcast. Like we were talking about this on the podcast. This was not the podcast.
True.
It wasn't. Literally, this was the point before the podcast. Before we start the podcast, we're just talking trash.
Yeah. So somehow, like, it was just supposed to be assumed that this entire fucking thing is like fake, you know? But then they mention how he could do 305 for, I believe, 20 in his prime.
I went and checked. I was like going through some of my records, and I found, because I do 10 reps for me is not something I would normally do. I do 20 reps. And I was looking at some of my old numbers, and 305 for 20. It was like something that I have done. 385 for 20. And that's a heavy freaking squat for 20. Oh, sorry, 285.
Yeah.
What did I say, 385?
Yeah.
No, I didn't do that.
Well, and here's the thing. This is a good point, too, that I think it's important to realize. It's subtle, but it's a big deal, where we were not, and this is why I mentioned this wasn't part of the podcast. If this was part of the podcast, you better get your numbers right.
Yeah.
But we're talking shit.
Just talking shit.
It literally, like whether that got recorded or didn't get recorded, there is no difference given the importance of the information that we're going back and forth.
Which, you know, does that translate to 375 or 385 for 10 or 405 for 10? You know, probably fucking not. But again, a lot of the semantics and a lot of the, you know, maybe they're not semantics, some of the more, you know, ambiguous details were clarified. Like he did mention how he does, you know, squat to the grass. There was even fucking comments in my comment section trying to figure out if he meant would hurt me, or him commenting on Echo's form, implying somehow that he himself would be able to do it, almost do it, but not with good form. But he could do it or not do it, but it might injure him, but it might not injure him. What he's trying to say at all. At the end of the day, like trying to assume that people think in a 1 million view video that's on your channel with 1.3 million subscribers is somehow all fluff when it sounds like pretty fucking serious. Like, what can you lift? I can, you know, maybe do this for this much, maybe just shy of that. But somehow the context at the beginning of they're setting up the podcast.
In fact, you probably didn't even, were in the middle of it, were you even thinking, dang, this is going long? Were you ever thinking that? It wasn't until afterwards, like, dang, that was long.
Just shooting the shit, and somehow it's supposed to be, the context is somehow assumed because they're kind of poking fun at each other that the claims of their lifts are just, you know, just should not be taken seriously whatsoever. Now, of course, they're not hard and fast numbers, which is why the context was given on, you know, probably couldn't do 405, maybe just shy of that, you know, maybe a bit less, you know, close to it, but not quite there. might hurt me, you know, at 405 for 10, you know, it'd probably hurt me, you know, I'd probably get injured trying to do it. You know, it's not 100% fucking clear what's going on there. Like, can you do 375 for 10 still to the grass at 50? Still fucking suspect as hell, dude, you know? So you can see he does a very good job of addressing like point for point.
We get through with those three sort of misleading things. And again, when I say misleading, I'm saying I'm misleading. It's misleading if you do a surface study of me and you see he works out 3 times a day, gets 5 hours of sleep a night, and can freaking lift 405 for 10, squat, ass to grass, all those things which Derek, you know, heard and correctly heard them. That's what was being said, or that's what he saw, and he was like, all those things together. That's one of the things that made him lean towards. And again, to his credit, the whole time every time he'd say like, yeah, then he'd kind of back off a little bit as well.
Could be wrong. He did say that.
He talks about, you know, the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. He talks about how many of his friends in SEALs were not on gear and whatnot. And like, you know, some of the rebuttals to that too, again, at the end of the day, how many people do I know that are prominent fucking gearheads and won't even tell their significant others that they fucking live with, and they inject literally like one wall away in the same house that they're on shit, you know? Most people don't even realize their significant others are taking trenbolone or taking this or taking that, you know? People lie to their friends about their dosages. They lie about tons of shit. If you were taking gear in any sort of organization that otherwise would ban you for telling your friends about it, if it somehow leaked, like, you know, is it not in your best interest to maybe keep it to yourself? At one point he touches on many times throughout the, like, I don't know, is this a podcast? Like, I don't even know. Like, I don't know how anyone would have thought, again, that this scene is not part of the podcast. Like they mentioned, you know, that part we're talking about lifting is not even part of the podcast. It's like fucking literally a post that almost has 1 million views on the channel Jocko Podcast. Deleted scene from Jocko Podcast. Like, you would assume it's part of the fucking podcast. So, anyways, that point, I was kind of like, it's hard to have the specific context to even understand as a new like listener or somebody overseeing it as like a bird's eye view perspective, you know, sweeping through the content, that it is not part of the podcast. But in this post, he mentions how right when he heard that they basically test all of the urine samples and they basically put into this giant soup of a fucking concoction of every single person and test it for gear or rec drugs or whatever, and if anybody pops, then there's going to be subsequent more like highly specific owned in on testing on individuals, and he didn't want to be even risk it at all. So when he heard that, he didn't do anything. And I don't know, it was probably just fucking wording at the end of the day, but one of the comments I thought was interesting in the comments section that basically says, almost makes it sound like he was wording it like, you know, I was thinking about it, but probably not worth it given that I'll get kicked out.
So I hear that and I'm like, okay, so they're testing. I'm not going to do this yet.
Ultimately, at the end of the day, it was cool of him to even address this to begin with, as well as do it so elaborately and with so much insight into the context of his life, his, you know, training history, his, you know, longitudinal data of his, you know, fucking lifts and stuff. Everything that you could have wanted to know to try and address these as best as possible, he basically did. And, you know, he obviously seems like a very, very well-respected individual who, you know, would not be lying at all. But like one thing I did want to mention too is the kind of like idea that like it seems that there's no incentive to do it. Like, again, if you circle back to my points about, you know, when you're getting into your 50s even, and you have this, you know, high demand lifestyle, you prioritize like multiple, you know, training sessions per day, you know, training, you have like a high, you know, demand on your mental state, you have a high demand on your body, you have a high workload in general. You know, there's obviously, you would think TRT becomes a discussion that's at least reasonable to be considering, and that's, you know, fine. He mentioned that it isn't, and if it ever gets to a point that it is, he'll, you know, circle back to it and perhaps even evaluate it, you know, openly. But right now he doesn't want to be replacing his hormones. You know, understandable if that's his perspective on it, and that's actually his perspective. You know, obviously there's the talk about the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu guys, and he's not really, you know, I don't think he's aware as most are about how prevalent it is in BJJ. Like, it's the most fucking steroid-ridden sport there is. But anyways, One comment I thought was at least worth touching on is this by Baneman. Imagine you're out on patrol with your fellow soldiers and you get ambushed by the enemy. You're able to avoid being shot and take cover, but one of your guys isn't. You run over to try and pick him up. You just don't have the strength to do it, and then you get picked off. As you're laying there bleeding out, your final words are, at least, ... I was Natty. As funny as it is, like, I think it hits pretty hard in that it doesn't really make sense why, if you're in a situation of life or death especially, you wouldn't want people on your side who are the most mentally and physically equipped to protect each other possible. Like, again, I understand that you're going to get, on paper kicked out if you do something, but like, it just seems like wildly illogical to have individuals that are being penalized for trying to improve their recovery, improve their performance, improve their stress resilience, improve every metric that could otherwise help the, your side excel. Like in, historically, how many ridiculous, not doping regimens, but like PED regimens essentially were deployed to try and get a competitive edge country against country, like it's not like, if it's a matter of life and fucking death, this is not the Olympics where we're talking about, ethical principles of trying to, stay within the rules. It's like, if you're gonna fucking die, like, why the fuck would I not be using whatever I can to like max out my mental sharpness? If I'm getting a complete lack of sleep because of, some rigorous schedule, why the fuck would I not be using compounds that enhance my stress resilience, mental acuity, sharpness, information retention, memory formation, alertness, etc., as well as things that improve muscle protein synthesis, offset, catabolism in general. Like, all these things make logical sense to be using, not just in a performance. And it's not just about, I want to be bigger. I thought it was big enough. Like, it's about fucking like being a more capable human of doing the job well, I would imagine. That's what, I could only speculate that it seems like a logical conclusion that a lot of people would be doing that for that reason specifically. And if it's against the rules, like, why? Like, I guess on paper, if becomes a controlled drug, unfortunately, it's, something that you just can't be fucking using. But again, if it's a matter of like life and death or something, like, why are these, stipulations being put on individuals that you would want at peak performance? Like, it seems, I don't know, a little bit illogical to me. Especially at the highest level, like, of sport, like how many people are circumventing drug tests. And these are far more elaborate than these that they're going through, where they have 100 fucking samples being wadded into a giant mega piss test. Like, how stringent do you think this really is at the end of the day? And there are a lot of individuals that seem to reinforce the notion that a lot of individuals were in fact doing it. Now, again, it doesn't mean everyone's doing it. Doesn't mean Jocko's doing it. And he makes pretty clear that he wasn't. So anyways, I just thought that was worth touching on. That's sort of my response without making this a super drawn out, hour video going point by point of his point by point of my point by point. At the end of the day, I thought his response was awesome. I thought it was very, very well laid out and clarified a lot of ambiguity on things that either I misinterpreted or he may have put out there that could be misinterpreted by others that would have led to certain conclusions being made that may otherwise, not have even been in the conversation otherwise, had he, made it clear about, fill in the blank point. Obviously, if you want to see the detailed insight, I would definitely recommend you watch my video, follow, and then his video. If you ended up on this video first, like, obviously the context of even what I'm fucking talking about is going to be completely missing, but he is very respectful of my channel, and I really appreciated that. And apparently he's watched some of my videos in passing before, which is cool to hear. And, basically addressing the rumors, because obviously wild speculation has, arose since the first video came out. And obviously it's been on people's minds. Like, it's a conversation that blows up on subreddits all the time, apparently. And when it's highly requested, I think it's reasonable to address at that point. Because again, like he mentioned, if people, look up to Jocko and they assume, Jocko's doing steroids, then at that point, maybe they justify themselves to do something that they otherwise wouldn't have done. But again, I should iterate, even if he was doing anything, like, I was talking in the context of something like a therapeutic replacement at 50 years old. There's a big disparity between saucing your fucking face off and being on TRT for the factors I mentioned previously in my first video. It should not ultimately influence what you do or don't do with your life. If somebody at 50 years old is on TRT, it doesn't mean you at 25 who looks up to Jocko should be on fucking Dianabol, nandrolone, and fucking test at super physiological doses. Does not mean that whatsoever. So I thought he made that pretty clear, and I thought this was a very transparent discussion whilst being very respectful of my content, and as well as basically hitting point by point to kind of address everything that may have been up in the air. So anyways, cool video. Definitely recommend checking it out. It's blowing up right now. I guess we'll see. I'm curious to see how many views it cranks up to, dude, because this is the kind of stuff that is very polarizing compared to like the regular content. Like imagine just watching, you know, Jocko fucking motivationals and random, podcasts, and all of a sudden you get hit with a Jocko response to being on steroids. Like, it's gonna be a popular one, I think. So we'll see. Anyways, let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. All the comments help the algorithm. They're much appreciated. Like, subscribe, check out my blog, moreplacemoredates.com. Follow me on Instagram, @moreplacemoredates. Facebook, Snapchat, Twitter, TikTok, Apple Podcasts. If you want to support the channel, you can check out anything I'm associated with in the video description below. My TRT clinic, all telemedicine from the comfort of your own home. If you want to get high quality oversight from doctors who actually understand endocrinology, as well as what kind of biomarkers and diagnostics you should be getting and how to interpret those and create an individualized protocol for you based on your own individual needs. This does not just entail pharmacology, despite me calling it a TRT clinic. In reality, it is a broad spectrum preventative medicine practice that is otherwise very, very capable of addressing naturals, bodybuilders who are trying to attenuate cardiotoxic, neurotoxic outcomes of what they're using, or individuals who simply have, hypogonadal symptoms and want to see what is the best route forward for them to optimize their quality of life, their health, vitality, etc. We do it all, and we're turnkey, and is what I am so prideful to bring to the public as somebody who otherwise had ridiculously hard time in the past just getting decent oversight in a preventative medicine context. Trying to get a fucking basic lipid panel was a nightmare, let alone getting a high quality doctor in my camp who's willing to work with me and be non-judgmental and otherwise be educated with the most up-to-date literature as well, and have recommendations that are in line with what is ultimately reflective of what is best for me. So getting a high quality doctor cannot be understated, the importance of it. And I highly recommend you check out our clinic if you are otherwise interested in getting care from the same doctors that I vet and reflect the same level of information that I try to put forth on my channel. So anyways, check it out, as well as anything else I'm associated with. My recommended diet model for gaining muscle and sports performance, the clothing company that sponsors me, anything else I'm associated with, it is all in the video description below. Thank you guys for watching. Talk to you soon.